Thank you, everyone. Welcome to Cerebral Palsy Answers. This is one of my first interviews in English. I am so excited. Don't feel out of place. This is still Parálisis Cerebral Respuestas, but today it's an interview in English. And today I'm going all the way to the East Coast, to New York, to interview Elliot. I am so excited to interview Elliot because we had the opportunity of speaking to each other prior, obviously, to this interview, and he has such an amazing story. So thank you so much, Elliot, for saying yes to this interview.
No, of course. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. And see what
Thank
insights
you.
I can share.
I was mentioning that one of the goals for me, moving forward for this podcast is to elevate the voices of people with cerebral palsy, all sorts of cerebral palsy. And we actually share a similar diagnosis, or the same actually, spastic diplegia, which made
Yeah.
us really happy. But I think one of the most, I'll begin with, you actually came to the US from China. And
Mm-hmm.
so you didn't grow up in the US, but you, as I mentioned, you came, I think you said,
Yeah.
when you were a kid. So how was that process, and how did growing up in China and then coming to the US made you aware of your disability?
It's definitely interesting. So, just for some context, I was born in Beijing, um, and I moved to New York when I was 10, turning 11. So the summer before sixth grade, I guess. Um, but I've spoken English all my life, and I went to an international school growing up. Um, But I would say, to answer your question, it's definitely interesting because the way that disability is regarded in China versus the US is, I don't think it can be any more extremely different. Um, Definitely in China, for the 10 or so years that I did live there, I very rarely saw other people with disabilities, um, just because I like most of them are just hidden away. They don't really go to school. They don't have opportunities to be integrated in society. They're just kind of left by the wayside and left to fend for themselves. A lot of disabled children or people with disabilities in China end up at orphanages, and then they go through the system. So I guess it's a little unfortunate, but coming to the US was a culture shock in that way. I think that I immediately started having more opportunities as a person with a disability. So in terms of playing a para sport, or just seeing people with disabilities out on the street, and that being normalized, that not being something that was questioned. So in China, you would walk, or I would be walking around with my mom, and locals who were just around, they had never seen me before, would just look, and they would ask really naive questions to my mom, like, oh, have you considered bringing him to the doctor? And she would give them kind of a sarcastic response, being like, oh no, I never seen the way he walks. But of course she had, that. It's so obvious, there's no, I don't know, she's my mother, she would have definitely seen that. So that kind of stuff never happens in the US. And I think that's just a cultural difference in the way that people with disabilities are kind of regarded. Um, Definitely, I've been more conscious of it, but in a also in a more positive way. So understanding that if I have a disability, that means that I have something to share rather than something to hide, which is kind of an ideology that I guess my parents have always impressed on me, even when I was growing up in China, but has really come to fruition once I come to the US.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the way disability is viewed in China is completely different than the way it's viewed in the US. You would say in your case, you felt like over there it's seen as a negative, and here you see more opportunity for people with disabilities.
Right. I would, I mean, to simplify kind of what you said, I would say that it's maybe not viewed at all in China. It's just kind of hidden away. But here it is viewed. And whether it's a positive or negative light, I think it's a bit of a nuanced question, but it is viewed here and it's not really viewed in China. So that's, I think, the biggest difference here.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So a huge part of your identity um, was sort of not seen before you came to the U.S.
And I think that, like, growing up with a disability, funnily enough, at my school, I did have two other kids with CP in my grade, for whatever reason. They were two foreign students, which I thought was a good coincidence. But I think there's a very big effect for a kid with a disability to see other people like them around, so that you know what's possible. But I didn't have that context growing up. I guess I knew of it because my parents would make sure that I did, and
Mm.
they would make sure that I knew that everything that I wanted to do was possible and nothing would hold me back. But just seeing those people in the US, like, gives me a sense of comfort, I guess.
So now, how do you feel about having cerebral palsy now that you live in the U.S.? I mean, you mentioned a little bit about it, but how does it
Yeah, I
make you
think
feel?
it's really interesting because it doesn't make me feel any one sort of way, right? It's not anything that I mean, it's something that I have lived with for my whole life and will continue to live with until I die, right? But I'd say that in China, I started advocating for people with disabilities. So I remember I was featured um, on, like, the local news, and then I was featured on a magazine one time. My mom, she started a clinic called Elliot's Corner, which was a kids therapy clinic. So in that way, I did see some kids with disabilities, but still not many. But coming to the US, I would say I really stepped into that role of trying to advocate not only for myself, but
Mhm.
just like for like a greater cause. Um, and it's something that I'm not only proud to do, but also that is possible to do. Like, I'm being given resources at school to show that kind of stuff. Just kind of, I guess that's the feeling that something is possible, that I can maybe make a change, rather than kind of watch the world go by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, that is powerful. That is something that I applaud you for. Like, you started very early on to be an advocate for people with disabilities.
Mhm.
That is awesome. But one thing that we talked about prior to this interview is that we were both very excited by is that we both share, the same diagnosis. We both have
Mhm.
spastic diplegia. And you said something very interesting was that even having CP with a bunch of people in the same room that have all CP, that sometimes you still feel like an outsider because there's not a lot of people or individuals that have spastic diplegia.
Yeah. So in that case, I guess when I said that to you, I was mostly addressing hemis, and I think that's probably the most common form of CP. And my hands, they both move. It's mostly in my legs. Um, so I don't really see people walk like me all that often. And even still, even if people are diplegic, um, there's just such a large range of what CP can look like. It's a bit weird. Like, sometimes when I see someone with CP, it feels a little bit difficult to relate. Like, I can relate to some of their experiences, but I think it's also important just for the audience as well to understand that not you don't just relate based on having CP. You have to really find some, like, resonating experiences. Just because I don't walk with a walker, I sometimes wear an orthotic, but there are people that always wear an orthotic or are always using a walker or always in a wheelchair, and so our experience there might be different, even if our feelings might slightly resonate. So there, I mean, that so sometimes I struggle to feel seen, because I walk with a little bit of a crouch. I limp around, I fall, but both my hands work, and I think that's but having both my hands work is a really big advantage at times. But there are other disadvantages that having neither of my legs really work properly comes with. So yeah.
Yeah. And that's exactly one of the reasons why, like I mentioned before, I want to, for people that are hearing us out there, to hear all sorts of stories, because disability in general, not only CP, is not a one size fits all. So it looks very different for all of us, right? Um,
Yes.
I often get the, you don't have CP. It doesn't seem like it. You're making
Yeah.
it up. Have you had that
Yeah.
happen to you?
I would, yeah. So if you like watch me now, you wouldn't really guess that I had CP. There's not really any reason to. And I think like maybe at school, the best example I can think of is like extended time on tests and accommodations. So I get that because I write slowly and I write very messy, or not as messy as before, but it's still a little messy. So I get time and a half on all assessments, and it's it's a strange process to try and explain that to new friends or new teachers,
Mhm.
um, because I do well in the classroom, and
Mhm.
so having to explain that something that you might like having CP, when you look at it visually, for me, it looks like it's just in the legs. Having to explain that it's in my hands as well, and just my entire bodily function is sometimes really strange. So you do have people kind of questioning the legitimacy of it or questioning the severity of it, but it's a little bit difficult to understand that yes, I can do most of the things that you do. I get around on my own. I take care of myself. I do my own laundry, that kind of stuff. But there are very simple tasks like tying a shoelace that I will never be able to do. I can't ride a bike. Um, Things will just look slower for me. But that doesn't make my issues any less legitimate or any less severe just because you don't really see the very specific parts of it. And,
Mhm.
I do very well to try and minimize or hide it, or like try and function as best as I possibly can.
Mhm.
Yeah.
May I ask, and maybe this is a very, very personal question, but
Hmm.
why do you feel why why do you try to hide it, or why do you hide it?
Well, I just I don't think hiding is the right word, but I do think that like in order to function, in order to take care of myself, I have to function as well as I can. So not hide it in the sense that I don't talk about it, because anyone that ever asks, I will talk about it extensively, and I will just always share about it. So I don't hide it in that way, but in terms of I'm already at a slight disadvantage in the way that I function. So the
Mhm.
best way that I can put up with it is to try and function at the highest capacity that I can, um,
Mhm.
just to level the playing field a little bit for myself.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I guess that's what I mean. Hiding it isn't really the right term.
Okay, no worries. I completely
No, no.
understand. Now, um for those that are listening to us, and we have all sorts of people listening, what would you
Hmm.
say to someone that just to a parent that just received the diagnosis that their kid has or will have CP?
So I don't know. Well, I've never been a parent, obviously. Um, so it's a little complicated for sure because I think everyone's experience is a little different. But I would say
Or to
I know
someone
that
in
my
general
parents.
that
Yeah,
got
yeah,
the
I know. My
diagnosis?
parents have expressed that when they first heard, they were obviously a little scared, um, which is completely understandable, and I sympathize with you. You know, um, so if you are a parent who has received news like this, I understand how you might feel, um, and your worries are perfectly legitimate, and some of them might come true. But at the same time, um, understand that there are resources out there, and the resources now are more extensive than ever before, and that your kid um, can achieve anything that they want to achieve as long as you have or you support them in the best way that you possibly can. I wouldn't say that there's anything in my life that I have really wanted to achieve that I haven't had the opportunity to do, or I haven't found a way around doing it. And I also think that, people each struggle with their own things in life. If CP is the thing that your child happens to struggle with, it might come with other things, but at the same time, just take that, embrace the struggle, and you'll find a way through it. You'll find a way past it. And I think that's the best thing I can say, because there's no running away from it. No amount of wishing it away will change it. The best way to deal with it is deal with it head on and try and take it as positively as possible.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to ask you to follow up with what you said about, if you're a parent that just received the diagnosis that your child has CP, and one of the things that I really liked about what you said is you'll get through it, right? Everyone struggles with something. What are some of the challenges that you have because of your CP?
They're numerous, right? So it's a little difficult to cover so quickly, but I'd say, so I go to a boarding school, right? Which is inherently a very strange thing for any person ever. But I chose to go to a boarding school after COVID because I wanted to be away from home for a little bit, and I wanted to, I don't know, I was sick of being stuck at home. So I went to a boarding school, and I currently still go to a boarding school. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is that I take care of myself every day. That means that I make sure that I eat. So I'll have to walk to the dining hall, I have to walk back. I make sure that I shower. I make sure that I do my homework and go to bed on time. On the weekends, I do my laundry, I tidy my room, I vacuum the floor sometimes. And all these things are, I think, things that challenge people with CP or present some sort of obstacle sometimes, because physically they're very difficult. Like, imagine carrying a laundry basket down the stairs. And I guess that has always been challenging. There are two ways that I would say I deal with these challenges in general in my day-to-day life. One is that I understand that I will always struggle with them, and so I'm patient with myself, and I try and work through it as best as I can, understanding that it won't be perfect. So maybe on the way down the stairs, if I'm carrying a lot of laundry, I'll do 2 trips when a typical child can do 1. The other way is that I try and make friends that are really understanding. And, my friends are the greatest people in the world, and they will help me out. And so I think that facing challenges while you have CP is twofold. One is that you have to really understand that, like, you yourself are going to work through some things that are difficult. And 2 is that there are people who are really good people and that are going to help you. And, my friends might help me with laundry, but they also help, pick me up when I fall over, or at least they come and check on me. And I think that is general advice on how to deal with challenges. Of course, they can never go away.
I just think you touched on something important, the importance of having a support system. And then in this case, good friends, and the fact that you have
good friends and good family as well. I don't want to neglect them. My family are incredible. So yeah.
So family and friends are very important, and I agree. Our support systems are essential. I always call my friends when I, need extra help with something, or just moral support, really. And what are some positive aspects you would say of having CP?
This one, okay. I think so. I'm writing college applications right now, and one is that I can write a college application pretty easily. So any college that asks for any unique challenge or part of my identity, I've got that base covered quite quickly, or at least I have an idea for it quite quickly. But I think that more generally, what that college experience has taught me, or is that having CP has given me such a larger insight on the world. So just being more understanding of people, being more compassionate, being patient, being caring and kind when other people are struggling. So, and understanding how to contribute to a group of people without maybe leading or like being the best at something. Like, so I think the positives of having CP are sometimes intangibles, but I would say they make me a more well-rounded person. I think they also make me a little bit funnier because I physically I might not be where my friends are at, but I will try and make that up by being funny and making people laugh, and that is a incredibly valuable little asset to have. So yeah.
I was just talking to a family psychologist, and he said that sense of humor, because I was telling him, well, I always make fun of myself. I always make fun of how I walk and things. And he said to me, actually, that was episode number 16, if I'm not mistaken. It's in Spanish, but he was saying that making fun of yourself and having a sense of humor is a sign of resilience.
Right.
So
I'd say, yeah, that's also something that's come with CP, like resilience, perseverance, not being offended by things. That those are things that I think will serve me well as I grow up. So.
And you mentioned that you have all these amazing qualities. You're kind and you're generous and you're patient and you're more compassionate. And one of the things you mentioned, you try to be. And one of the things you mentioned that I really liked in our previous chat is that, and something that we share in common, is you dislike the whole inspiration porn thing about having a disability, right?
If I remember correctly, we were talking about the term special needs, and so my perspective on the situation, I think a lot of disabled or people with disabilities think that the term special needs is a little bit disingenuous, and they don't think that their needs are special and they should be respected and whatnot. And I agree with that. I see where that's coming from. But at the same time, I think that the term special needs really encompasses what I have. So I have needs that people might need to accommodate for. People around me, need to make sacrifices in order to make my life work as smoothly as it does. And in that way, they're special. And I think that they should be recognized as special. So if I need extra time on a test, or if I need you to, like a group of my friends, to slow down while they're walking, I think that they should recognize that. And they should recognize that I have a reason for them to need to do that, And so in that way, they're special needs, because I think that I'm not special. I feel like that's a little bit full of myself. But there needs to be recognized outside of a normal person, or like normal needs of a person. And then, however, about the inspiration porn thing, I don't think that I'm particularly inspiring. I'm really not. I think you should be inspired by me if you want to act like me, not for the fact that I battle through having a disability, which I fight through doing it, but I wouldn't say that it's a really tough battle, because it's just what I need to do. People fight their own battles, and so having a disability is one of my many battles. And so I don't think that should be regarded with any like extra wow than someone in any other situation with whatever they're struggling with. And I think that if you are really looking up to someone with a disability, it should be because, hey, they act a certain way that I want to act, or they do things that I want to be able to do, or they treat people a certain way that I want to be able to learn to treat people, or they speak a certain way that I want to like be able to speak like them. And I think that's where inspiration should come from, because you also don't look up to like a politician necessarily because they're a politician. You also look up to them because they do good things in the world. And so I think that same perspective should be applied to how you look at people with disabilities and how you admire them.
Yeah, so not because of the disability. It's not like, wow, you're inspirational because you're able to live a full life
Right,
despite the fact that you have a disability. No, it's more of your actions that determine, you know,
right.
who
Yeah,
you who you are, and if you should be looked up to, in this case, kindness and generosity and compassion. Those are
right.
traits that really differentiate people and make a
Yeah,
difference in the world.
yeah.
So you're going to college. That's a very exciting time. I remember when I was
Yeah.
about to go to UCSD, I was so excited, very nervous as well. But well, I have two questions, and these are the two final questions. But first, what is something that you wish you could change? And let's say a politician is hearing us, or someone in a place of power to change policy, or anything really to influence. What would you
Hmm.
like to change in favor of people with disabilities like ourselves?
I think that I mean, there's no one like policy or anything that I would change. Um, just I can't really think of one off the top of my head. I think that my life is pretty good, but I do think that the sentiment is general sentiment is something that needs to change. So what I mean by that is people like how people think of people with disabilities. So uh, it, I think there are two perspectives. One is that people with disabilities are very limited in what they can do, and one is that like having a disability is some sort of superpower that like makes us unique and like gives some, but it's not a superpower, but neither is it a something that should limit what I do in life. So what I mean by that is that yes, I feel at least that my disability is a disadvantage. It's a physical disadvantage. It will hold me back for in some way for the rest of my life. Like I can't ride a bike, which makes going around to places a lot slower, a lot less efficient. Um, but that doesn't mean that bigger opportunities like going to college and studying what I want to study and doing what I want to do after and like a professional career should be limited for me, or something like playing a sport. That's stuff that isn't limited to me or limited for me, and that is something that even if I have to pursue in my own way, I I can still do that. And I think the other side of it is that like so I'm not limited, but it's also not some sort of superpower. So you shouldn't, and I think that viewing it as some sort of superpower kind of trivializes the struggles that I do go through. So
Mhm.
I like it's a big ask from the audience, and I think it's confusing because it's a little confusing for myself as well when I think about how I think about disabilities in general, but it needs to be regarded with nuance. So you need to see, I think that people should see people with disabilities as people that have some sort of inherent struggle, but not looked as less than other people, I guess.
It goes very well with what you previously said, right?
Yeah,
That we shouldn't be seen as inspiration because of our disability, but because of who we are, rather, as
yeah,
people, as human beings,
yeah,
right? The
exactly.
traits that makes us who we are. Um, and lastly, what is something that you want to leave this interview telling people? I don't know. You can mention, something that what how and you mentioned it previously that having CP has made you more compassionate, but is there anything else that you would like to leave this interview by telling other people about what it is like to have cerebral palsy specifically?
I guess if I can wrap it up very nicely, it would just be that I'm just here doing what I want to do. Like I want to live my life to the fullest, and I'm gonna go about that the way that I best see fit. Um, and I think that that is a thought process that everyone with a disability should go through. You should just want to do what you want to do and try your best at it. Not everything's going to work out, because it never does, but just as long as you put your heart and your mind towards it and you try and make it work out, I think that it is successful in the end, or as successful as you try to make it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Elliot. Thank you so much for taking the time to do the interview, for sharing a little bit of your story, for sharing your perspectives, for giving us sort of a glimpse at what your life is like with CP.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate you, and I certainly hope that this is the beginning of a friendship between us, because I think you're awesome, and thank you so much. Any final thoughts?
No, thank you for having me. I think that this is great. I do often share what it's like having a CP, but in some sort of unofficial capacity. So it's really nice to maybe share in a more official capacity. And I hope that, if someone out there listens to me and resonates with me, that I hope that it brings them some sort of comfort or joy to their day. That's all I can ask for.
That's amazing. Yeah. Of course. If anyone ever wants to get in touch with you, then that listens to this podcast, I could possibly send them your information, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to.
I'm available on Instagram, I guess, but yeah, you can look for me. I'm around, so
that's awesome.
I'll answer any questions. So.
Thank you so much, Elliot. And again, Elliot is in New York. He's getting ready to go to college, so that is very exciting times. And really,
I'm getting ready for senior year, so I'm applying to college. But
okay. There you go. So, still very exciting. And what I really am trying to do as well is to build a community. And I think the more voices and the more we hear all sorts of stories, the better we understand each other. We understand our different perspectives, and hopefully this world becomes a little more inclusive and accessible, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you for doing this. I think this is a big step. So I guess even making change to a small community results in a big change eventually. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Elliot. It's been amazing to talk to you. That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me in another episode of the Cerebral Palsy Answers podcast. And remember, if you have any questions regarding cerebral palsy in Spanish or English, please submit your question to cerebralpalsyanswers@gmail.com or head over to my website, www.azucenagarcia.com, and you can submit your question there. Thank you.